everybody. I'm Quentin, founder and CEO of HyperFusion. And for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk with two hats. So one hat is the CEO of a high-performance computing company located here in the UAE with the largest cluster for GenAI applications. And the second cap is basically my VC investor arm. Both caps are important, especially if we're going to talk about ecosystem, because network effects is the number one thing we're looking for in VC. Now, let's look back in 2022. Every time as a VC investor, I was wiring some money to some companies, we realized that 50 to 60% of all this money is going to computing in different kind of sorts. So really, we were seeing, well, all this nice VC money goes into computing, hyperscalers, and this frustrated us a lot. And this was before the whole ChatGPT, LLM revolution that we all are facing now. So we started doing a macro analysis about, okay, how can this change? How can we create a different ecosystem? How can we change how computing and startups are also monitoring their computing, and how are they controlling ultimately their spending? Now, we need to understand is that we've moved from buzzwords to business transformation in the past 2 years. It has never been achieved in the history of humanity. Everybody here in this room have used a GenAI related product just this morning or coming here, without even them realizing it. It could be for ChatGPT, it could be for them using a Google Maps related product, it could be for payment. You've all used it. And these were all products that did not even exist just 3 years ago. Now, once we understand this macro shift, how can an ecosystem not only be alive, but be successful? And so we came in with the conclusion that an ecosystem needs 3 pillars to be able to strive. And these 3 pillars are absolutely non-negotiables. You have to have these 3. Number 1, talent. But talent has always been a problem in tech. I think we had a great talk before saying that the entry barrier was very, very high, and it's still very true. So I'm going to talk about the ugly side of AI, not the sexy kind like the one-person billion-dollar unicorn. No, I'm going to talk about the ugly side, which is how do you get the backends running. You need to understand is that to get this running, you need a mix of data scientists, infrastructure engineer, front-end, back-end, mathematicians, and this is a whole line of business that us VCs thought was the old world. From 2000 to 2019, we thought software is king. It's only software, don't bother me with hardware, it's the old world. And now everybody's like, okay, what's blocking every AI startups is access to hardware. So it's funny how we came back 180 back to the fundamentals, which is hardware. So to be able to assemble all of this talent, you need to have an incredible ecosystem with the universities, having access to best talent, researchers, a great pipeline with business to make sure that they are working on immediate feedback, what as the companies actually are working on, so we can have this immediate background. We need some full fluid information flow, which means the market participants needs to be able to talk to each other, because right now, talent in AI is a very relative statement. Everybody's an AI expert on LinkedIn, right? So the idea is how do we back check this information, how do we understand, and how can we work together to be able to elevate ourselves. Number 2 is data. Now everybody has whole year, data is the new old, and we fully agree with this. But what people don't understand is that it is your oil. What does that mean? It means if you don't protect your data, somebody else with another AI will use your data and will destroy your product. And that's a different paradigm shift that people don't really necessarily understand. Data has always been extremely important, make no mistake, but nobody really took it very seriously. And I can tell this, I was a tech entrepreneur and on board of many tech companies. When we talk about data sovereignty, everybody was like, And then the Europeans came with the GDPR and were like, oh gosh, we follow this. Otherwise they come after us maybe in 10 years. But now I start every single business meeting by talking about data, because it was something storing your pictures on a data center somewhere in Ohio. It's something extremely different if you have strategic proprietary data that can be used to train an agent that understands your business vertical better than you do or whoever will. That's radical change from what we had before. The importance of data now and how it's understood and how it's computed, this is your value proposition. We say to analysts, it's very simple. If a startup comes to us and pitches us that they work on an open source LLM and non-proprietary data, it's done, it's over. Because somebody with more money and more computing will come and take over. Which ultimately leads me to the third non-negotiable pillar. which is computing. And computing is really the ugly aspects that we don't like to talk. Of course, NVIDIA is the #1 market cap on Earth, so we kind of understand where it is from a 30,000 feet perspective. But what we don't manage to really understand is the complexity to actually monitor this. You cannot buy a GPU online and run it in your living room. You cannot run it. It is everything. I call it to my partners the $1 million industry. Every decision we take takes $1 million. The hosting, the infrastructure, the talent, the licensing, the compliance. The entry barriers are actually extremely high. But it is absolutely necessary for an ecosystem to strive to have an onshore computing, because where data basically gives you a competitive edge in your local market and your proprietary data, computing allows you to transform the try and to stay competitive. And we've seen the race for clusters. Elon Musk just sent a picture on Twitter, XAI, 2 weeks ago about his latest cluster, 100,000 GPUs just for him. And we start to understand, like, okay, these clusters are getting bigger and bigger. Meta Group announced 350,000 GPU cluster. We know that there's a race to who has the biggest, but when we ask ourselves, why are they putting quite literally tens of billions of dollars in these clusters? Well, because the complexity of the models, the size of the data sets, once you all have this, what is your key differentiator? We're all very smart, we all have access. Ultimately, it's computing. And you need to see when oil is data, computing is your refinery. What I mean here is that the oil per se that goes out of the ground is unusable per se if you don't have all this industry that can transform it into a great product that everybody can use. And now, all of these AI companies who have raised a lot of money come usually from the software world. And they come in once they raise $20, $30, $40 million, and they realize, okay, wow, we have a problem. The problem is so big that in 2023, 80% on average, 70 to 80% of any capital raised in AI startups was spent into computing. So we start to understand the importance as computing as a commodity. And this is what we say to our teams, is that the moment we start understanding computing as a commodity, the moment we understand that this works in parallel with talent and data, then we can foster an ecosystem. Now, our journey into fostering the ecosystem here in the UAE is very interesting, and we're so proud to be some of the pioneers building it here. Now let me share you why we're so bullish and why we decided to build here and why we're so bullish for the future. Before 2 years ago, we started to scale our operations here. We could have put everywhere. Personally, I'm from Switzerland. I could have scaled there, could have scaled the United States, anywhere. But we were looking on a more macro perspective. We were thinking about ourselves, okay, what is the next bottleneck in 5 years and 10 years? What is going to happen in terms of clusters? And we like to think that, ironically, as a Swiss, we think the UAE is the new Switzerland in terms of data, in terms of hub, where everybody around the world can actually meet and exchange ideas, which solves the first pillar, talent. Everybody from the world, the best, can come in and out and share these ideas to strive for real innovation. Number two, we realized that, okay, these clusters are going to get bigger and bigger. Now there's an energy bottleneck that we won't feel now. We will probably feel it in 5 or 10 years when these bottlenecks actually going to appear. And we want to make sure that we could be in a region where there is predictability, that we can understand, like, okay, this will be our expansion plan. In 5 years, in 10 years, we'll need 100 megawatts for this to happen. And last but not least is pretty much the understanding of regulations in AI, where as a European it was default illegal. We're going to regulate the problems we don't have. We like the approach here, which is it's default legal, which is this is the sandbox. You guys can go in, please execute. This is why we decided to scale here, and it's been unprecedented. However, we are in a competitive business globally, and for this region to really be a leader beyond the incredible work the government has done, I think all the companies have to come together. Now let me give you an example for you to understand our headaches when we wake up in the morning. Connectivity is the #1 problem we have personally, where you would have in China and Western countries 80 gigabyte per second connectivity, which is a standard. Here, a 10 gigabyte is already, wow, it's crazy. But you need to understand is that the demand comes from our end customers. Models are in the petabytes, so you just do the math. If you have a 1 gigabyte symmetry, well, that could take, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to download just your work. So it's insane. Imagine the capex you need to explain that you're paying these servers that are being used just to wait for the information to get it downloaded. So that's what needs to be built, which is the 3 pillars plus infrastructure as a whole. And when we call infrastructure as a whole, which is connectivity, but also energy. But why are we so bullish? Well, the second best largest connecting country on Earth for internet sea cables is actually the UAE. So it is an extremely strategic asset this country has managed to build, and it makes it de facto the natural hub for everybody who wants to scale. Most of the information between Europe and India at some point goes through the Fujairah substations. And in terms of latency, which a lot of you will, I'm sure in a lot of talks will talk, latency is the end game. In terms of inference and user experience, this is what we want to do. Now, in the 2 years we started Journey, needless to say that I haven't taken a holiday because this country, this region, is, I think, at the forefront of an incredible revolution. But for this to happen, and independently of the incredible data protection laws, you know, there is something of having a law and there's always something of respecting it, you know? It's like, you know, if there's no speed control, it's always tempting. So I think for us to really have this industry to strive on its data, to make sure that we do not take over by foreign models who will use our data, we need to have a great education about the importance of how this data is stored. Today, most people using AI do their computing and they're storing abroad. I do not blame them. Frankly, without a solution and without a rigorous enforcement of these laws, I would probably done the same. But we need to understand as a whole, as an ecosystem, that if we don't do the effort in the short term about keeping our computing, our data, and making sure our talent come and meet here, then it will be very tricky to build. However, we, personally at HyperFusion, we are more bullish than ever, and we sincerely think that with everybody, part of the industry and the government, we can really fuel this region and make it the global leader in GenAI as a whole. Thank you very much.